So it's going to be a couple more days before the marble paper arrives. So we've got an opportunity to do some things with the book that I think they're quite marginal. I wouldn't say they were mandatory in any way as part of the core process, but they just might, there's just a few lessons learned from when I restored this guy. Which is also available in a separate playlist, and they're things that just make a very, very slight difference, because this turned out really well, but I think there are a few shortcomings here and there that could make the difference between a book that looks great and a book that looks really pretty awesome. So I thought, let's use the time and do that. So the first thing is, if you look really closely, you'll see a line here, down here, and here. So that's where the edge of the leather is. It's covered by the marble paper, but it is visible literally as a step. And it's possible to make that go away. And what I've been doing with this book is a little bit of extra work just to try and avoid that. So these are binder scraps, basically. Pages. I mean, these pages themselves are 300 years old, and I've been basically pasting them on this book here, like so, in a way just to really like this, just to build up a level to avoid that step. Now, the other problem this book had, you'll probably recall from the earlier videos in this playlist, were that the actual boards themselves were actually pretty disgusting. They were pitted and extremely uneven, fragmented in certain places, with big dents. There was sort of, I don't know, animal hair and so on. I don't know what these boards have been made of, but it was probably everything that was on the barn floor of the book binder back 400 years ago, I guess. So not very pleasant for me to work with, to be honest. And if I just put the marbled paper directly onto those boards, the result would actually be somewhat uneven anyway. You'd actually be able to see the sort of pits and dents underneath the marbled paper. So I wanted to avoid that. So what putting these pages on does is it just kind of evens out and creates a little bit of a surface, like so. There we go. There we are. So it just creates a little bit of a surface that's flatter and more even. And the other thing I will say is, after having put down a few layers of this paper, I was actually sorely tempted, and this is, I guess, the sort of arty, pretentious side of me. There was a piece of me that basically said, you know what, this actually looks really cool on its own. Do we really need the marble wallpaper? Couldn't we just throw this thing literally onto the shelf like this and be done? And I don't know, it does kind of look cool, but no, I'm going to stay disciplined, and we'll continue to do this. So it just creates a nice, extra, sort of bit of a standard, if you like. So now the way I do it is, I sort of, obviously these pages are smaller than the book is, the book cover. So I sort of alternate, as I build the layers up, I sort of alternate where the seam is. So it's up here, the next one will be down here, and that way you don't get another sort of line forming that we don't want. So just like this. So obviously this will all be nicely covered with marble paper, and it'll look really even. There we go. Stay down. There we go. That'll dry. So it's just a matter of continuing like that. I'm going to put another. I think that's going to work well there, actually. So I'm going to put another piece on the top here. I need this great big guy here. And then once this side is done, we'll do the same underneath as well, and that'll hopefully avoid this sort of stepping effect. It's also just quite nice and satisfying to do in its own right, to be honest. And now, one other little thing that I've noticed that is a little lesson learned. So, when I was trimming the marble paper, I kind of had the realization that I was actually in danger of creating a little gap on the inside of the board. Let me show you what I mean. So if we look here at the bottom here, you see that? The way that cuts away like this? Now, that's because I came down here with the scissors and just cut straight down like that. And when you fold that over, you get this cutting away in this direction. And what that can do is just expose what's underneath in this little shape here, right there. Now, immediately you've got the paste, you'll have the paste down covering the rest. But again, it's just a little imperfection. So a way to avoid that when it comes to actually using the marble paper is when you get here, just mark that edge and then switch the cut to going upwards. And then what that does is when you fold it over, you avoid that edge, like so. So, here we go. So now we've got the seam here. I'll probably do another layer, put the seam here, and slowly build it up until basically this is almost, it's basically at the same level as the leather. And then it'll become, you won't then really see a line in any sort of prominence sitting below the marble paper. Now, another thing I've done is this sort of paste here. This is a mix of the glue and white toilet tissue. The reason I used white toilet tissue is the wood fibers in that product are designed to fall apart on immediate contact with any kind of liquid. That's why it doesn't block sewer pipes. So if you apply it with the glue, you can very quickly get a papier mache of sorts like this. And this is just very good for filling in little gaps here and there. So if we look, let's get this little blob off here. Now, if we look very closely here, and I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. You see this here? Now what's happened is as the leather's dried, when it was in the brace, it retreated a little bit this way. So I've now got this slight sliver of a gap. And obviously these pages have straight edges, so if I were just to leave that, I'd end up with this the same level as this, but this sort of gap here. So little imperfections like that can actually be solved just with, this applies to all sort of imperfections, frankly, where you're looking, it's no different really to using plaster as a decorator. You're sort of just making go away gaps like that so that there we go. This literally is almost painting and decorating at this point, like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to This will actually dry surprisingly quickly on the leather, so I'm going to be pretty aggressive in terms of getting rid of it. And it's not so much the paper fibre that concerns me, it's the glue. I don't want the glue to sort of create an extra darkening of the leather if I can avoid it. Whoops, just stay where you are. All right, like so. So it just results in a, I might have to get a little bit off from that in a moment, but it just results in that gap there being filled in. We can do a little bit of the same thing at the top here, where we have basically the same problem. And we'll just get a wet cloth. Okay, that'll do. So, and we can use this paste for another purpose as well, which is, if I zoom back out. So with these corners, you may recall one of the problems that these boards had was they were actually really badly bumped and eroded here. So I folded the leather over and it's glued in place. But it now means that we have a sort of a void in there. So we can also use, you also see we've got some gaps here and there where the leather actually shrank and pulled away here against the force of the clips. So we've got a gap there. So we can actually use this paste in the same way again, just to get in there and fill that void. And what will happen is, obviously the glue will eventually set and dry, and it'll just create something that's a little bit more rigid inside the leather there. Won't be perfect, you know, it won't withstand for all knocks and everything else, but it just creates a surface. And we can also, if we really want to look at this, just use a bit of colorant to then color this surface, so it's not so obviously white. So that's a process we can continue as well with the other four corners. And yeah, I don't want to get the text block. Put it like that for a second, so we can continue that process. So those are sorts of the things that I've been doing here, and it's just going to create a surface, hopefully, that when we put the marbling on, it'll just be as, you know, even and ready as possible. It'll just really make the book look good when all's said and done.